Welcome to another episode of an intimate conversation with women of color. Today's guest is Sheena Yap Chan. Sheena, welcome to the show.
Hey, Deneen, thanks so much for having me here today. Super honored to be here just to chat with you.
You're very welcome. So, Sheena is a keynote speaker, coach, podcaster, consultant, and author on building self confidence. Sheena helps Asian women break out of their shell so they can live an authentic life and thrive. Sheena, tell us more about you.
Yeah, for sure. Again, thanks for having me. And for those of you who may not know me, my name is Sheena Yap Chan. I live in Toronto, Canada. And as Deneen mentioned, I help Asian women break out of their shell so they can live an authentic life and thrive. And to me, that's very important, especially growing up in Canada with not having any Asian female role models to look up to. It was really hard for me to accept my cultural background. Part of me really wanted to change my name to Heather, have blonde hair and blue eyes because that's what I thought being beautiful was. And for the longest time, I didn't want to be Asian, right? I wanted to assimilate to Western culture because that's all I ever saw on TV. And so it wasn't until my 20s when I realized, you know what, I'm Asian. I have, dark brown hair, and that's just it. And so it took me dyeing my hair back from blonde back to my original color to realize my cultural background. And so I want current generations and future generations to have someone to look up to and not feel the same way that I did growing up here in Canada. And so I've always wanted to create a strong representation of Asian women, especially with what's been happening now in America and Canada with the rise of Asian hate crimes. Most of the targets are women because women are targeted 2.5 times, almost 2.5 times more than men. And so it's really important for us to showcase a strong representation of Asian women, learning to speak up, learning to overcome fears and have the courage to stand up for things that we believe in. And I know it's not always easy, especially with how we're brought up in this world, right? We're brought up to just, do as you're told, never make a noise, never make any noise, and never rock the boat. And because of that, now our silence is literally killing us. And so, it really started with my podcast called The Tao of Self-Confidence, where I interview Asian women about their journey to self-confidence. And since then, I've been able to interview over 700 Asian women on this topic and have had over 1 million downloads on my podcast, which never thought was possible. I was happy if there was 100 people listening. And
Right.
so it also led to things like creating books, like these books behind me called Asian Women Who Boss Up and International Women of Color Who Boss Up, because people don't realize how the pandemic has really affected women, but more so women of color. And we need to create representation and show others what's possible and this is why books like these are very important, because we need to see what's possible for ourselves. And as women, we won't we won't forge our own path if we don't see women like us who have done it before. And there's studies on this, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there was a stat where if a woman sees other women in leadership, there's an 86% more chance that woman will follow suit. So that is why representation is important. I always get this question, well, why can't you learn from a man?
Hmm.
It's simple. It's because I'm a woman, and women are totally different from men. Yes, we can learn some things, but we're two different people, two different beings, right? Women, we go through so much more than men, and sometimes I don't think men realize how much women go through, right? And so this is why it's important to create representation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a couple things come to mind for me when you were talking about how you were younger and what you were seeing, brown, blonde hair, blue eyes. It made me think about my sister when she was little and would come home from daycare. She would grab a blanket or something and put it on her hair, to have that long. And the thing is, my sister had long hair already, right? But whatever that she was saying, and probably the same of what you were saying, that's what, her circle was. And so that's what she wanted to project when she came home, that. And so with the representation, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And a lot of work that I do, I'm very intentional about the representation, about the diversity, to lift up, whenever we see things, women, different women, and, I was managing a program and it was for Latina girls. So I made sure to have Latina women for them to look up to. And so what you're doing is definitely in alignment with that. And so besides the representation, why is it important for women of color, Asian women in particular, to have a voice? So other than the things that you've shared in the representation, why is it important?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, society always sees Asian women as quiet and submissive and obedient, or we're treated as sex objects. And because of that stereotype, we end up being treated as objects and not have leadership roles or CEO roles, or not even have promotions, or not have equal pay, or not even being humanized, right? Because they see us as this one thing. And a great example is what happened in Atlanta a couple of months ago, right? There was a shooting and 8 people died. 6 of them were Asian women. And the media did not, they took their time to even try to release their names. And instead of humanizing the victims, we became the blame for it because we're seen as sex objects, which is really wrong, right? If a woman wants to be in the sex trade, who am I to judge them, right? But there's also situations where women are fed this story that if you come to America, you're going to live the American dream, and they get scammed into the sex trade, right? And now they have no other choice but to do that because they have a debt to pay, right? Or this is the only way they think they could provide for their families. So this is why it's so important to showcase stronger representation and not judge women by what they do, right? Because we're all different beings. We all have different talents and skills and preference. And that's what makes us unique, because we're different. And I always love showcasing multifaceted Asian women because it's really important. I mean, even in my podcast, I've been able to interview a woman who can fly a plane with her feet
Oh,
because she was, the first armless pilot. She was born with no arms. I've interviewed a woman whose sole career is writing and singing Christmas songs, right? And nobody ever would think of that. I mean, Christmas only happens 3 months, maybe about 3 months out of the year, but in other countries, they celebrate it half the year because they love it. And so we never know what's possible until we see someone out there who's doing it. And all it takes is one person, right? It takes one person to open the door for so many, because I believe if one woman wins, we all win, especially, when we see more representation, like at the Oscars, when 3 Asian women won an Oscar. I mean, that's huge, right? Now they're opening doors for so many other Asian women and men as well in the entertainment industry. Or seeing the first Asian woman who is promoted to be a head coach or head
oh,
coach for a team, right? I mean, that's amazing, right? And it's funny because we get so much pushback because we're women, even though we have the credentials to be that position, right? Like this woman who was the head coach, or I don't know what they're calling it. I don't really watch sports, either head coach or head honcho for that team. She had the credentials for a long time, for over 15 years, but it's because she's a woman. Nobody took her seriously. She applied for the same position in 5 different teams, never got it. And if it was a man, he would have gotten it right away. And so this is why it's so important for us to go out there and show them what's possible, even if it takes longer, even if we have to work 5 times harder or even 100 times harder, because that's the cards that we're dealt with, right? Unfortunately, that's just the truth, right? And sometimes the truth hurts, but when we can get past that truth and realize, you know what, this is going to take me a little bit more to get to where I'm going, and I'm okay with that, then we can move forward.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, she may be the general manager, but it's
Yeah, general manager, you're right.
I think it's Miami Marlins, but it's the
Yeah,
baseball team. Yeah,
yeah,
and pretty remarkable. And in the last year, women have been recognized and taking the top leadership position. So it's good to see. And I like what you said. We never know what's possible until you see it.
yeah,
So absolutely true, right? Because you just think about just things that are going on today, just anything, like let's just say social media. Remember
yeah,
when social media first started, and it was just something people did as a pastime, and younger kids probably got in trouble for being on it. And now
yeah,
people are actually getting paid as social media managers, and large corporations, of course, have budgets for that. That's part of their marketing strategy. But it wasn't possible until it was.
yeah.
Right. So absolutely. And again, to your point, that's where that representation comes in. So you're using your voice to help Asian women break out of their shell through your international best-selling book, Asian Women Who Boss Up, in your podcast, as you've already mentioned. And again, the podcast is a tile. Is that right, tile?
The it's called the Tao of Self-Confidence. Yeah.
Self-confidence. So what was the inspiration behind both, more of the inspiration behind the book as well as the podcast? Again, the
Well,
representation, the things that you talked about. Anything else? Was there a specific incident?
I think most people start things because they just wanted something that they never had in their childhood. So that was like, I wish 12-year-old me had something like this, especially in my 20s too, growing up with confidence issues. Like, I just couldn't find any support systems that catered to Asian women. And so a part of me always felt like, am I the only one going through these issues? Like, am I crazy? Right. And because mental health is such a taboo in the Asian community, nobody talks about it. And so even if one like even if we wanted to talk about it, we would feel shameful because it's like something is wrong with us, when really mental health is just a part of us. It's going to happen to us a lot of times, especially now with the pandemic, especially now for the Asian community where we have to deal with the pandemic and racism. So I mean, that's all going to heighten up, and the more we can talk about this and normalize mental health, the more we can be able to heal a lot faster, right? And bring down the numbers such as like suicides, right? The suicide rate is so high because of mental health.
Mhm.
And so when we can learn to talk about this and find outlets where we can just let it out, right? Whether it's to write a journal, talk to a mental health professional, or even just go outside jogging, you do what's best for you. And so that was one of the reasons. It's just because I never saw anything like it. I never saw anything out there that I could find, right? Same thing with the book. I've never seen any books that highlight 16 Asian women on a cover of a book, and it's 2021. And if there is a such a book, nobody talks about it, right? Most people, when they write a book, they just, I don't know, talk about it for a day and kind of leave it in the shelf, right? Not realizing a book can be so powerful and you can use it for years. I mean, some of the most well-known self-help books are like over 100 years old and people still love them to the day, and you still use those principles, right? And so this is why I really wanted to create the book, is because there's no books out there like it. And the same thing with international women of color who boss up. How many books do you see where, women of color are highlighted on a cover of a book and, promote actual diversity and inclusion, and not what companies say, they literally hire one African American woman or one Asian woman or one Latina woman and they just call it a day. Like, they literally just tick off those boxes, right? That's not really diversity, right? Hiring one person of color is not diversity.
Right.
And also nowadays, right, with everything that's been going on, it's also a great way to show that we're all in this together. We're standing in solidarity, because I understand it's not only the Asian community that faces racism. Every person of color faces racism, right? Whether it's the stereotypes we go through, or the history of how racism even started, right? Some of the things that people don't even know is that in the Asian, like, in the Asian community, is that back then we had a Chinese Exclusion Act, right? That was set in America and Canada. And I think nothing is more racist than barring a person from a country based on their cultural background, right? But nobody talks about that in schools, right? Why don't they bring that up, right? And people think, the racist acts that's been happening to us now is all brand new. It is not all brand new. This has been happening for centuries, right? It's just nobody talks about it or nobody brings it up. And of course, the history is led by, Caucasian people back then. And so they never wanted to look bad. They always wanted to look good. They always wanted to show off their achievements, not realizing now they look really bad with what's been going on, how the pandemic has been handled, all the racism that's been going through, and how every person of color is being treated unfairly. Like, the more you look at it, it's like, wow, what is America doing? Right. And even Canada, we also go through it. A lot of people think, Canadians are nice and perfect. Yes, we're nice people, but we still go through racism, and we actually get a lot of polite racism, right? So there was an article where a Caucasian woman went up to two Chinese guys on the bus, right? And she went up to them and she said, "Oh, do you guys have the virus?" It's because they're Chinese. She just assumed that they would have the virus. And, these are things that happen all the time. I mean, I have a friend who recently got a job at a law firm last year, and she was being introduced to all her coworkers. And one of the ladies, she was like, "Oh, wow, you really look like Kathy. And if you look like Kathy, they look nothing alike. But the one common thing they have is they're both Asian." And so it's really ignorant to think that all Asians look alike. And this is why we are going through what we're going through right now, because of that same notion that all Asian people come from China, and that we're the blame for the virus, and that we're being targeted based on that notion. And it's not only Asian people that are getting targeted now, even Latinx people are getting targeted because they're being mistaken as Asian. I remember last month that a 70-year-old Mexican woman got beaten up at in a bus stop or somewhere because they thought she was Asian. And it's, for me, targeting an elderly is just really cowardly,
Yeah.
right? Like I get why they do it, because there's a huge language barrier, right? And so for the elderly, it's hard for them to express what happened in English, right? There's a big communication barrier. And also it's hard for them to recognize their assailants, right? Like we can't just, prosecute random people that we don't know just for the sake of it. And it gets frustrating, right? Because every single day an elderly gets targeted, and it's like they're getting pushed, they're getting beaten up, they're getting stabbed. And it's so unfair because they've already gone through so much trauma, migrating from Asia to here or to America.
Yeah, and you talked about things that we didn't learn in school, and you're absolutely right. Actually, what you just talked about as far as the policies that were put in place to exclude certain people, right, from certain countries. Oh, we've reached that quota and whatnot, so we're not going to let any more people in. I actually didn't really learn about that until maybe 2 years ago. It was I was at a Martin Luther King Jr. Day event, and it was Angela Davis. You may know of her. Activist,
Yeah.
she mentioned it, and was kind of like talking through that, that was part of her discussion about how people were excluded, and because they wanted to keep things looking a certain way, and maybe something, political was going on with that particular country. So we're not going to let them in. And if we do let them in, then we're putting them in this space, and, and just keeping them there. And even just thinking about like Miami. So I'm watching something on TV, and it's what is it, fiction, and the person is describing the areas of Miami, and they're saying how with the Cubans, the government let the Cubans in, fine, come on through. Haitians, oh no, we're going to put you over here, we're going to box you in this particular area. And so what you're saying about the Asian community, the various Asian communities, same things, from depending on where you're coming from, you're definitely treated differently, right?
Yeah.
Especially with over 30 different ethnicities within the Asian community, right? So it's like, oh, you're good, come on through, not you, not so much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that this is still happening and it's 2021. Like, we should be past this, but the pandemic has really set us back, right? It's set people of color back, it's set women back. I mean, people don't realize that women had to sacrifice so much during the pandemic, right? Especially when kids are at home. Who do you think is taking care of most of the time? Who do you think is taking care of the kids? It's women. That's just the truth, right? I'm not saying, all men are bad. Of course, there's men out there who do the same amount of work, but honestly, women have to juggle everything, especially women entrepreneurs who are mothers, who have to run errands, feed their kids, teach their kids, do the chores, make sure dinner's cooked. I mean, it's crazy, right? And it just sometimes it just grinds my gears because I see all these gurus, right? These male gurus who talk about the hustle and how you have to hustle, 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 but they don't really know what the hustle is, because they can focus on their business while their wife is taking care of the household, right? They don't know what the actual hustle is until they're a woman. Can you imagine if the roles were reversed and men had to do everything? It would be a totally hot mess, right? And, I hear, women's stories of how they're able to just overcome everything. And, they always get asked, how do you do it? And sometimes, when you're dealt with those cards, you have no choice but to deal with it, right? And as mothers, right, you want to do the best for your kids. And that's all you ever hope for, right? And so, just talking about these things is really, really important, because sometimes people don't understand it, right? They don't understand why we have so much more requests. Is because we have so much more to do, right? Like have men try and carry a child for 9 months and go through postpartum depression and cravings and crazy when you're pregnant, just the hormones are like going crazy, right? Like nobody understands that. And because if you even say one little thing, now you're labeled as a difficult woman, and that's a career killer. It's just so exhausting sometimes, right?
It is truly exhausting. It is definitely exhausting. And the layers, you're describing the different layers that we have, right? And even when I had a recent conversation with someone, I said, hey, we all go through like the same things, right? The basics we all, but then with us, women of color, add this, add this, add this, add this, add this,
Yeah.
and so that's our life, that is what we're dealing with. And so, and yeah, the pandemic, it exposed a lot as well, right? As far as losses, yeah, we heard the statistics of women, losing jobs and whatnot. It was women, definitely women of color. Um, and again, just exposing a lot, because I think that a lot of what was going on was always going on. It just wasn't necessarily exposed,
Yeah.
right? And we all couldn't see it at the same time, but now, we were all in a situation to be able to see some of the things that we've seen all along.
Yeah.
Where other people were starting to see that, oh man, I didn't know that was going on. I did.
Yeah. We
You
see it.
know?
Nobody, it's just nobody talks about it.
Right, right. I did, or we do talk about it, but you're not hearing us,
Yeah.
right?
Or it's not on mainstream media, right?
Yeah,
Like for months we were crying about, our Asian communities being hurt, and mainstream media wasn't doing anything to talk about it. It took the Atlanta shooting for them to start waking up and be like, oh, yeah, I guess there is a problem, right?
yeah,
And it's so frustrating, right? When they're not using the media for good to bring awareness to help our elderly be safe. Like it's so crazy. And then people think, oh, this only happened once. Actually, it hasn't. It's been happening for a long time. Before the shooting, every person that wasn't Asian, I talked about this problem, the first thing they said was, oh, I didn't know this was happening. And I'm like, yeah, of course you don't know, because nobody talks about it. It's not on mainstream media. If you're not if you're not getting your sources from, Asian journalists or media companies, you wouldn't know this is happening. And so it's so crazy that all these things are happening. It's just, when is it going to ever end?
and you mentioned something earlier about diversity and how one Black woman or one Asian woman or one Latina, that's not diversity. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but lately I'm starting to see Asian people in commercials.
Yeah.
Didn't really see it before, but
Yeah.
it's sometimes people are just so obvious. Like now we're seeing it. Why weren't they in commercials before?
Yeah.
What I'm saying? But it's always like, it's that thing about, oh, okay, well, they take us off a shelf. So we're gonna play with you this week, you know. And then when something big happens and maybe the attention is there, then we're gonna put you on a shelf and take you off of the shelf, as opposed to just having us all together and
Yeah.
intertwined, if you will. But yeah, I definitely have been noticing, it's like, wow, they turned down around quick, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't see them, Asian folks, I didn't see them in a commercial, let's say a month ago. But
Yeah.
after the shooting, if you will, now I'm seeing, it's like, wow, you guys turned that around real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So considering your work with women, I'm sure you encounter women who don't recognize the power of their voices.
Oh
And I
yeah.
say using your voice could be, speaking like we're doing now. It could be dancing, movement, however you express yourself. And again, based on the work that you're doing, what do you say to these women?
I help them, just go for it, right? Sometimes women can't do it alone. They need a helping hand. And one thing that women really lack is support, right?
Mhm.
So just being that cheerleader for them to just push through makes a huge difference, because I've been there too. There's days where I'm like so scared that I just don't want to do it. But
Yeah.
because there was someone out there who's just kind of like tapping me and say, just do it, push through your fears. Because, once you get to the other side, it'll
Yeah.
be all worth it. And once you get to the other side, it's not as bad as you think, right? You're still standing, you were able to overcome your fear, and you're ready to take on the next thing. And so sometimes it's just also just having someone's back, right, makes a huge, huge difference. I know mindset too is very important. How we see ourselves is so important. And this is another conversation that as women we deal with a lot of confidence issues, right? And that's why we have a huge confidence gap from men. Men, most men have no clue what they're doing, right? But they will BS their way to make
Mhm.
it seem like, yeah, they got it all together. And once they got that, they're going to figure it out along the way.
Mhm.
Right. And as women, we should do the same. Right. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm doing that right now. Half the stuff I'm doing, I was like, yeah, I could do that. And then
Right.
I'll look it up. Right. Because
Yeah.
and I do that because I want to prove to myself that I'm capable, and I want to show women that we're capable, because we're so much more capable than men. It's how we see ourselves that really stops us from going into our greatness.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that. And then, so one of my favorite quotes, and it happens to be by a man, but it's when an opportunity presents itself, say yes and figure it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's me kind of, in my words, pretty much how it's stated. And that is it. Go for it. If it's something you're interested in doing, go for it. Make it
Yeah.
happen, right? And figure it out. It's
Yeah.
okay, you
It's
know.
if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, right? And as women, we're such perfectionists, right?
Right.
And that's also because of the gender biases we go through, right? It's not proper for women to talk about their business or services. It's not proper for women to promote themselves. It's not proper for women to sit on, I don't know, everything's just
Yeah.
not proper, right? And when you're Asian, everything's shameful. So it's
Yeah.
like, it just packs it onto us, right? Well, we have to understand, like, these are just someone's like perception. It's not like the absolute truth or rule, right? You as a person, you get to do what you want. You get to pick the
Mhm.
destination you want, how you want to do it, what makes you feel, what feels right for you to do, right? If there's something that you're doing and it doesn't feel right, you need to learn to stop it, right?
Yeah.
Because as women, we have strong intuitions, right? And we most of the time we ignore it because we're afraid to go for it. And sometimes when we take it, we're like, this is not how I pictured it, right? It's like the total opposite. But when you look back, everything will make sense. And
Yeah.
so this is why it's just important, right? Like, I remember a female producer, one of the things she said is, just shoot your shot. Shoot your shot. Who cares what happens? You never know what's going to happen, or who's going to, say yes, right? Or even if they say no, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Like, I recently had a coaching session with a lady, and she's like saying, I'm so like not as confident. I mean, this alone, being able to book an appointment with you was like even really scary for me, right? And I'm like, you should celebrate that because you made the first move to book that appointment. And I think we take all these little success for granted,
Mhm.
right? Just these little small steps that really builds our confidence, because it's these small actionable daily steps that really yield that big results. And so it's really important to celebrate that, right? I told her, like, give yourself a pat on the back. That's the first
Mhm.
step, right? Like, you wanted to help, you wanted help, you went and looked for it. You decided, I'm going to book a coaching session with this person and, you know, start getting my life together, right? So being able to celebrate that is very important, because we take a lot of these small things for granted.
Absolutely. And that's key because you know what? It builds into the larger steps, right? And when you
Yeah.
like, oh, I just accomplished that thing and I survived it, right? The world didn't, end or anything. And I'm still feeling good. As a matter of fact, I feel great. I feel good about it. So you celebrate that. You're getting yourself used to that, the celebration, doing stuff and being able to celebrate it. And now you're ready for that next thing. And then the next thing and the next thing. So absolutely, absolutely. And also something that you said, so what we're talking about is two things. So we're talking about the representation. Representation is absolutely important. But then if that thing that you want doesn't exist, make it.
Yeah. I say that all the time. If
Right?
That's why I created the books and the podcast, because I said, if I really crave for representation, I have to start it.
Yeah.
That's it, right? And I tell people that all the time, right? People keep complaining there's not enough representation, there's not enough. I'm like, well, then just create it, right? Who cares if you start from zero? Because we all started from zero, and people will appreciate your journey, right? Because they see you from episode 0 to like episode 800, right? They understand that you've been putting in the work, right? You are serious. You are bossing up to create that representation.
Absolutely. No, I love exactly what you're saying. And I have, these conversations, and that's what we talk about. We talk about we are on a journey, right? And so it is to see, well, this is what it looked like at the very beginning. This is what it looked like in the middle. And then here's what it looks like today. And it's a progression, right?
Yeah.
And it should be. And if it's not, it's okay because it's part of your journey and you can speak to all of that. So absolutely we're in sync. So my sister, author and poet, Soul True, wrote a book, Dreams Deferred. And so now I incorporate that into the podcast. So, was there a time that you had a dream that you delayed? And if so, tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, just this whole on there's so many things I delayed because I was so scared of how people would see me, or I just never thought I was good enough. Like speaking was one of them. I just thought nobody would want to hear what I had to say, right? Or I was just scared people might make fun of me or say like, look at this crazy Asian girl trying to be like, who does she think she is, right? And so that delayed me a lot. Even doing video delayed me a lot because I was just so scared people would make fun of me. I remember creating my first YouTube video. It was a 2-minute video about how cool it was to work from home, but it took me 2 hours to record that 2-minute video because I would like turn on the camera, say something, screw up, turn it off, delete it, turn it on again, say something, and like my hands were sweaty, my armpits were sweaty, my stomach was in knots, I was stuttering like crazy. I had to go to the bathroom a lot because I was just nervous, right? And when you're nervous, you just do these crazy things that I like it just happens to you and you have no idea why, right? Sometimes like I would laugh out of nervousness and people are like, are you being serious? Like, why are you laughing at me? It's like, I'm not laughing at you. I'm just nervous, So yeah, there was lots.
Right. And we go through that and it's all good, right? Because sometimes it is the universe telling us, you know what, pause on that maybe right now, come back to it,
Yeah.
or actually you should be doing this instead, just changing up the things that you're doing. So, yeah, absolutely. So, you've talked about how this month, May is Asian Pacific Islander
Yeah. Month.
Heritage Month. It's also Mental Health Awareness Month. You talked about COVID, you talked about the racism. How are you taking care of you?
So, one of the things I do is I really like working out. It's my form of meditation. And so learned this a long time ago. When it comes to confidence, you really need to pick and choose what works for you, right? Like me trying to meditate, like sit down and like go, and like trying to listen to a meditation tape, like it's just not for me. Like I really just end up falling asleep and it just doesn't work for me, right? But being able to jog outdoors is really where I can just mind dump everything, just kind of like let everything go and just have that time to myself, right? It's really important to take care of yourself, have self-care, because these are things that they don't talk about in school, right? You need to set some me time, right? Whether it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. That's better than nothing. And so even being able to have a support system where you can talk to, right, about what you're scared of or what you're feeling, like it's very important. And it could be your friend, your family, or even a mental health professional. There's no shame in paying for it, right? If it can help you get better, why not? Right. I mean, through this whole book project, I've been able to connect with so many amazing women and they've become like my squad, right? Because there's days where I'm not like always confident. Like I would wake up and all these thoughts are in my head. And then I need someone to tell me, like, it's okay. We all go through it. I got your back. If anything happens, we're your cheerleaders. And so it makes me feel a lot better. Or, I talk to my friends, they tell me the same thing. Or, even if I'm like, oh my God, like a couple months ago, this large network in China asked me to talk about the Stop Asian Hate that was going on in America. And so I checked out this network in China, and they have like over 115 million followers on Facebook. And the show is an English speaking show, and with this award winning host, and it's a primetime show, so there's lots of viewers. And so I was like ready to puke because I was like, oh my God, I've never talked to that many people. And if you probably saw me on TV, I was probably a wreck because I was like stuttering, I was nervous, my hands were like ice, but I pushed through it, right? And I was telling like, the people that, in the book, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be in this show and I'm like puking. I'm really scared. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I know I have to do it so I can get over this feeling, right? This nauseating feeling, this feeling of fear, all these crazy thoughts that I have in my head, so that when I go on the next television show, I'm okay. I'm not as scared as before. And sometimes we just have to do that, right? You know, if being nervous in a TV show with over 100 million people is what will take my fear away, then I'll do it.
Right? Yeah, just get it done. And and make it happen. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. And so absolutely with the mental health, right? Absolutely if you're going through something, some things you can talk to your squad about, right? You can talk to your sisters, about those things. And other things you do need a professional, somebody who has an expertise in whatever that thing is. And here's the thing, make them part of your squad as well.
Yeah.
Make them part of your personal, board. Like I have a grief counselor that I've been seeing since October, right? I lost my sister in October and had two other deaths since then. And so I talked to a grief counselor. You talked about, the voice and people wanting to hear what you have to say. That's how I, started the podcast, because I had a little, like I was hesitant. I wasn't quite sure why. My coach, said to me, hey, people want to hear what you have to say. And then I read something, mentioned vulnerability, and I'm like, oh, that's what it is. I have a fear of that. I was holding back. And then once I recognized it, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do it, make it happen. And I did,
Yeah.
right? And continuing, it continues to grow. And it's a journey because it's something that I can share with other people and say, hey, this is what was going through my head prior to starting, and this is where I'm at now. Like I'm not stopping. It's growing. It's changed. It's gone from a podcast. It's YouTube. It's Facebook community, LinkedIn community, Instagram Live. All of that is going on. But I started with, I'm just going to do one episode a month, and here where I am today, right? And in just a little bit over a year. But that's my journey, and it's something that I'm able to share with other women. It's my representation, right? It's my example in investment to other people. So as we begin to wrap, what would you like to leave our audience with?
Yeah, for the women who are listening to this, or men, don't be afraid to go out there and pursue what you love, right? Life is so short and you don't have to do it alone, right? Go find your squad, go find a support system, whether it's to hire a coach or find a mentor or connect with people. Like, you don't have to do this alone. And I think as entrepreneurs, we always feel like we're alone in this journey, right? But we don't have to be. We can choose to create a squad or community or listen to podcasts. And so that's the advice I would leave them with. Do your best to overcome your fears, because that's what really boosts your confidence. And for those of you who want to connect with me, you can check out my website, sheenayapchan.com. I also have a free report, 8 Ways to Boss Up in Your Life and Business. You can also pre-order this book, Asian Women Who Boss Up. You can pre-order a signed copy, and you can get both ebooks on Amazon, International Women of Color Who Boss Up and Women Who Boss Up. And for those of you who'd like to have some coaching, I also offer 20-minute complimentary coaching sessions. Oh,
So
and for the podcast, feel free to check out the Town Self Confidence on Apple, Spotify, Google Play, all the major podcast directories. And you can check out my website, thetowerofselfconfidence.com. But if you forgot everything I mentioned, just look up my name, Sheena Yap Chan. I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan on the internet.
yes, you are. And that was because I did look up before I had emailed you back, and I'm like, is this you? And you're like, yep, that's me. And so all of this information will be in the notes. So again, if you forget even the name, you'll be able to get that information when the episode is live. So Sheena Yap Chan, thank you so much for lending your voice to an intimate conversation with women of color, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.
My pleasure.